So one of the cheeses that we developed after the caves, now that we had kind of some more space and, you know, a couple years after the Cellars, we sort of still had open shelf space. So we invested in a second creamery. So Willoughby and Harbison today are actually made in the Vermont Food Venture Center, which is an incubator space in the nearest big town. It's like got a stoplight and a bank. And a food incubator. So if you have a berry farm, you can go there and make jam in a certified kitchen and then have access to resources to help you incubate your new business and launch your product, and then maybe get to a place where you could scale into your own facility. So that shared use space has a private section to it, and that's where our creamery is. So we're sort of the anchor tenant. We help sort of cover the overhead of that as that project develops. So we make our soft cheese down at the Vermont Food Venture Center, and Willoughby is another soft cheese that we're going to taste today. So this is Willoughby here. It's similar in texture to Harbison, not quite as gooey, so that it can stand up straight on its own. Doesn't have the spruce bark, but a really similar recipe otherwise. And something that's kind of interesting differentiation between the Harbison is that instead of growing the fluffy white rind on it, we are washing it with a salt brine. So excuse my little crumples here. Okay, so instead of that fluffy white rind, we are growing sort of a sticky, tacky rind that is doing a similar thing. It's contributing enzymes from the microbes that we're cultivating, and it's breaking down the fats and proteins, kind of releasing the water from that rubbery, spongy curd and creating a beautiful, soft, kind of gooey texture. But the aromas that you get are funkier. They're a little bit different than the bloomy rind family. So I mentioned bloomy rinds tend to go in the mushroomy, vegetal, garlicky direction, and a washed-rind cheese is going to be more like funky, meaty, maybe fruity, think like peaches and apricots, and sometimes like spring onions, that kind of those kinds of flavors, maybe some scallions. So the bark is usually worse than the bite. This is the stinky cheese family. Like Limburger is probably the best known, or Epoisse, the French stinky cheese. And they are quite aromatic, quite funky, and like a little bit like, ooh, what am I smelling there? Is that food or what? But then once you eat it, it's much more mellow and gentle on the palate, and it kind of surprises you with like how balanced that flavor can be for how stinky it is. So if you're not familiar with washed-rind family, this is another type of cheese that we're seeing more and more of these days as the American cheese movement like develops and sort of matures into its next phase. We're seeing more customers understanding and looking for the washed-rind cheese family, and then more cheesemakers responding by offering that. And the American cheese making scene has really helped build that interest just by making the cheese they love and then doing the work of educating consumers about what to expect. And of course, you know, Europe has been helping us develop that market for centuries too. All right, so that Willoughby. And Willoughby is particularly, I would say, on the spectrum of funk, is kind of like middle to low on that spectrum. So it's a good gateway cheese. It's a good way to explore the style. It's not super overwhelming or assertive. It's really quite well balanced and meaty. This cheese, Michael's just about to say, well, what would you pair this one with? So I love this one with a funky sour beer or a dry cider, maybe like slightly off dry cider, but hard ciders are also having a moment right now. And washed-rind cheeses and hard cider is just like a lovely combination. They balance each other really well. It helps bring out the fruitiness of the cheese. Especially if you have a cider with a little bit of effervescence, those bubbles help kind of clean up the palate from the very rich and gooey texture of the cheese. So that's a combo to keep an eye out for. All right. So Michael's put together an awesome series of content for this month. If this is the first one that you've tuned in for, I highly encourage you to check out the other ones that he's put together. I'm going to do two more, one pairing chocolate and wine, and the other bourbon and some charcuterie. So we've got a lot of fun stuff coming down the pike. And you're also able to order a tasting set from Jasper Hill. That's going to be the same cheeses that we're going to use in different settings. So this was the story of Jasper Hill and the artisan cheese movement. And then in the pairing classes, we're really going to dive deep into the sensory properties of each cheese and pair them with other things. So you can pick up that tasting kit at jasperhillfarm.com/shop. And then there's a link to that specific tasting kit for these classes. So I'm so happy to be able to be here today to share the story of Jasper Hill and my love of cheese, obviously. And thanks for supporting American Cheese Month and American cheese producers all over the country. I hope you have a lot of fun tasting and learning more about it. Thank you so much, Michael, for having me.